everybody stop what you're doing. Our show just got canceled. And we were like, what? Like, we didn't think that that was even a possibility. And here I am. I picked up my entire life and moved it to the other side of the country.
When did you get into journalism or reporting?
In high school, I found out that we had a class called communication studies. Someone was like, yeah, there's a TV studio on the second floor. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Mr. Bazubiak teaches it, and there's like a studio in there.
How did that transfer into interviewing celebrities?
Story short, I ended up getting an audition for a show on MTV2 Canada.
How did the transfer happen from Canada to the US?
We were owned by a company called Chum at the time. They were about to get bought out by another one called CTV. And we were like, this is cool. We're going to get a new studio, like maybe a new budget. Like, we were really excited about this. And I remember we were working away at our desks, and my boss came in and said, everybody stop what you're doing. Our show just got canceled. And we were like, what? Like, we didn't think that that was even a possibility. And here I am. I picked up my entire life and moved it to the other side of the country. It was a long trek.
You did an interview in 2011 with Anne, is she called Anne Hathaway?
The Anne Hathaway interview.
That went viral. Can you give us some context of like a storyline of what happened?
It's so funny because that interview was almost...
What do I need to know about you to understand how you became the person who's sitting in front of me?
I think that it all dates back to just this love of storytelling. I think that that's the key and the core of this. When I was 4 years old, that's kind of where like the origin story begins, I guess. I had a Fisher-Price tape recorder with like actual cassette tapes, and I pretended to be the radio DJs that I heard on the radio. I was just obsessed with broadcasting, both radio and TV, and I would emulate the radio broadcasters that I heard on the radio. I think that that's where it begins, and at the core of broadcasting is storytelling. And that's essentially what we have now with podcasting as well, and content creation in general. It's this idea of storytelling. And I love this idea that you and I could experience some crazy thing today. Like, we could walk out of here and there'd be some wild car crash in a fire. And the way that you retell that story to your friends and the way that I retell that story to my friends might be slightly different. And I'm obsessed with that difference. I'm obsessed with the idea that your story and my story will still be the same core story, but it'll be a little bit different. So that's kind of where it begins. I was a kid growing up in Pickering, Ontario, Canada, about 30-ish minutes outside of Toronto. And I just loved this idea of maybe, hopefully, possibly one day, I could live a dream of being a professional broadcaster. And man, how lucky am I that I actually get to do it now.
How was your relationship with your parents growing up? Like with your dad?
The best. Yeah, my parents are, they're still together. And 52 years, they just celebrated their 52-year wedding anniversary. They were amazing and so supportive of whatever it was that I was doing at the time, whether that was playing sports growing up. Of course, I played hockey growing up in Canada, also played baseball at a pretty high level as well. They were supportive of that. They were supportive when I ran for vice president of the student council in high school. And the reason I did that is because that guy got to do the morning announcements. And I treated that like my own little radio show. But they were always so supportive. My dad was there and my mom. They were there for every hockey game, every baseball game. When I was wrestling in high school, they were there for that. They were always there to just say, hey, we don't understand your obsession with pro wrestling here, but if that's something that you want to pursue, we've got your back. And I think that them giving me that ability to just say, do whatever you want. If it's something that drives you and makes you happy, go for it. And I think to have that safety net just allows you the freedom to go out, try it. If it doesn't work out, cool, move on to the next thing.
When did you get into journalism or reporting? Because you had that interest when you were young, but when did it transfer to actually having as a career?
So in high school, I found out that we had a class called communication studies, which I had no idea what that meant. But someone was like, yeah, there's a TV studio on the second floor. And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? I'd been going to that school for 2 years, Pine Ridge Secondary School. And I'm like, what do you mean there's a TV studio? They're like, yeah, at the end of the hall, it's called communication studies class. Mr. Bazubiak teaches it, and there's like a studio in there. So the next year I enrolled in communication studies class, and that was where I started to go, oh my gosh, like we can learn within school how to run these cameras and run the audio and do all the things behind the scenes. And then what I was really driven by was like be in front of the camera. that was kind of where this began. And it began just as an idea of like, we can learn how to do this thing. We can chase after this thing. Like I said, I did the morning announcements in high school as well. And then there came this point, I'm sure it's the same for you, when you have to apply to go to college. So you're like filling out the application to go to college. And essentially they're asking you as a 17 or 18-year-old kid, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And it's a tough question to answer when you're like barely figuring out what you want to do even right now. And I was like, well, the communication studies class was pretty fun. I guess that's the thing I'll try to major in college. And I got accepted to major in that. I didn't really know what that meant. But that was kind of where the journey began. All right, I'm a communication studies major in university. Let's see where this goes and where this takes you. And for me, where that took me was I learned a lot about the theory of communication. I learned a lot about like stuff dating back years and years ago. There wasn't a lot of practical application. I wasn't doing a lot of like sitting in a studio with cameras and like figuring it out. And I think the day for me when it really changed was I woke up in my senior year of college and I was having the best time there. I lived with 4 of my best friends. We drank lots of beer and just had the greatest college experience ever. And I woke up and I said, oh my gosh, when we graduate at the end of this year, we have to go to work for, 9 to 5, 40 hours a week, five days a week for the rest of our lives. And like that idea just terrified me. And why it terrified me was I was scared of the idea of going to a job that I hated going to. I was scared of being one of those people who just lived for the weekend. Monday to Friday just to pay the bills, to enjoy Saturday and Sunday, to then the back half of Sunday, oh my gosh, I got to wake up tomorrow and go to that job. I never wanted to be one of those people. My goal in that moment was I just don't want to hate my job. So the goal wasn't even I want to love my job. The goal was just I don't want to hate my job. And I reached out to every radio station and every TV station in my college town. And I just said, I'm a communication studies major. I'm passionate about broadcasting. Can I come in and volunteer and see how it's done in the real world? And I would say that was like where it really began for me, because one radio station said, come on in, be a volunteer. You can like hand out stickers at events on our street team. I was like, cool, this is amazing. There was a community television station run by volunteers. And they said, we take on volunteers all the time. Work behind the scenes here. And I was like in an actual TV station, running cameras, running audio, floor directing, all those cool things. And then this other radio station said, we don't take on volunteers, but how would you like a job? And we'd pay you. And I was a board operator. So I was like running the board of like these talk shows. And then after my shift was done, I would go into the recording booth and then I would read like some of the scripts from the day. So I would have like an audio recording and like just honing my craft. That's really where it began for me in that final year of college of like, I just want to do the real thing right now. Like the classroom stuff was fine, but I want to be in the real world doing the real thing.
How did that transfer into interviewing celebrities, wrestlers?
That took a few years after that, because after I ended up graduating from college, I was looking for an internship that I hoped an internship would turn into a job somewhere. No one wanted to give me an internship anywhere. And I reached out to like every radio station, every TV station, not even just where I lived, like outside of the province of Ontario as well. I was reaching out everywhere across Canada. No one was even giving me like an interview for this. So there was a small TV station in Peterborough, Ontario, about an hour away. And I looked all over the internet and I sent an email to the general manager. I found his email address and I sent him an email and I said, I'm going to be in town next week because it's my reading week, spring break. Could I just come in and talk to you about a possible internship? And he said, we don't really do that, but if you're going to be in town, sure, come on by. And you know this because you're sitting in front of me right now, 10 minutes from where I live. You know the idea of how powerful it is to be able to say, I'm going to be there. Yeah. Like if you can make yourself available, it's a lot easier to get to yes. So I went in, had the interview. He goes, we don't normally take on interns that aren't affiliated with getting like school credits, but what the heck? Sure, why not? So I had this internship and it was like an hour drive, like 100 kilometers, 60 miles each way to get there. And to pay for the gas to drive there, I took my old high school job in the mall. I worked in the fish department of a pet store. So I would work there one day and I would drive to the internship the next day. That was kind of how I got my initial start in TV. I was there for about a year and a half, like as a local news reporter. When you're in a small station, you're doing everything. Writing, editing, producing, reporting, you're wearing all the hats. That experience I got built up a demo reel, and I was sending that out for like hopefully hosting jobs. Long story short, I ended up getting an audition for a show on MTV2 Canada. And that was kind of where the celebrity stuff started, because I ended up getting that job again, because I just was like, hey, the job was in Vancouver, the other side of the country. I'm like, I'm going to be there next Thursday.
Yeah.
And they said, well, if you're going to be here, I guess you could have an interview with us. That ended up, basically I talked myself into getting that job. And my first day there, I was interviewing musicians, and then it went from musicians to comedians to actors to all kinds of celebrities. I did my first wrestling interview there as well. And I was like, I love the idea of how being an entertainment reporter / TV host, you could show some personality. Whereas when I was on the local news, you just had to give them the facts, you know? So that's kind of where it began for me.
Can you talk about when you first interviewed your first wrestler?
So
because you have a passion for wrestling as well, right?
I love wrestling. I've been a lifelong wrestling fan, and I did my first wrestling interview in 2007. So I was working for a show called 969 on MTV2 Canada. And at that point, I was like 3 months into the job, and I'd interviewed some actors and some celebrities and a lot of musicians. And I saw on the upcoming schedule that WWE was coming to town in a few months. So I asked my boss, I said, could we interview a wrestler? And she's like, yeah, we've done that before. Sure. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get paid to talk to a wrestler? Like, this is the merging together of two of my passions. Like, I love broadcasting, and I've been a lifelong wrestling fan. That's going to come together here. So I got to interview Bobby Lashley, who at the time was the ECW champion. And he came to the TV station like early in the morning, and we actually did the interview on the roof of the TV station. So it's January, it's kind of cold. We're like standing on the roof of this thing. I was so nervous for that interview. And I'd done plenty of interviews before that, but I was so nervous because I knew what this meant for me as a wrestling fan. Like, not only was I going to talk about like the bare bones stuff of like, how did you become a wrestler? Like, how did you get into this? Tell me about some of your favorite opponents. It was like me asking like the nerdy wrestling questions that I'd always wanted to know the answer to. And then I also, during that interview, challenged Bobby Lashley to a fight because I thought it'd be a fun moment on TV. So I was like setting up like, oh, you know, I wrestled in high school and I was a very accomplished backyard wrestler. So I'm wondering if right now you're willing to step up, be a man, and put that title on the line. And he kind of like smiled and like, yeah, I'll put this title on the line any point in time. I'm like, what about right here, right now on the roof of City TV? And he's like, yeah, you better have some backup. And like, that was our moment of like, I'm trying to challenge Bobby Lashley, like still looks the exact same now. I feel like he's aged like, 12 minutes in the past, what would that be, 18 years. But that was such a fun moment of like, here I am getting to interview the people who I look up to currently or looked up to like growing up. So little did I know that that was the first one that was going to like start this whole thing that I have now.
You had white hair during that period, right? White tops. I saw the interview.
I had the worst hair. And that was like, it's so funny because I had that hairstyle for probably 2 weeks, maybe even less than 2 weeks. And the story behind that is I was on TV there. This is a national TV show, so coast to coast. And I'd been on that show for like maybe 3 or 4 months. And nobody I felt like had ever like recognized me in public. Not that I was like using this as like a barometer of like, am I doing a good job or not? But like, I was expecting that someone at some point in time might be like, hey, you're the guy from The Thing. So I had this bright idea of like, maybe I'm like blending in too much. Maybe I'm not standing out enough. So I went to the place where all of the TV hosts on the show were getting their hair done. And I was like, could I get like this little blonde patch? I'm a big pop punk fan. So it's like a blonde patch, like the lead singer of a pop punk band. And they were like, all right, sure. So I put that in, didn't tell anybody, showed up to work the next day. My boss was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm like, I know. Do you like it? And she's like, that's interesting. And I was on TV for, yeah, not even 2 weeks, I think. And it just so happened that my first wrestling interview with Bobby Lashley was during that window of time. And I feel like maybe a day or two later, my boss called me over to her desk and she goes, "Hey, when are you getting your next haircut?" I'm like, "Well, I just got my haircut, so I don't know, maybe another month or so." She goes, "I think you should make an appointment tomorrow."
Yeah.
And then I dyed my hair back to looking normal again.
How did that period? Because you're still in Canada at that time,
Yeah.
right? How did the transfer happen from Canada to the US? When did it happen?
So I was on that show that I was telling you about, and I was having just an absolute blast. It was a dream job, especially for me at 23 years old when I got that job. And then our show ended up getting canceled. And that was really what put the wheels in motion for me to try to figure out what was next. I was on that show for almost exactly a year. And I remember that we were getting bought out by a big media conglomerate. So we were working for, we were owned by a company called Chum at the time. They were about to get bought out by another one called CTV. And we were like, this is cool. We're going to get a new studio, like maybe a new budget. Like we were really excited about this. And I remember we were working away at our desks and my boss came in and said, "Everybody stop what you're doing. Our show just got canceled." And we were like, what? Like we didn't think that that was even a possibility. And here I am. I picked up my entire life and moved it to the other side of the country. It was a long trek. I packed up my 1995 Toyota Corolla with everything I owned, drove it 47 hours across the country.
Jesus.
And here I am now being told that I don't have a job. That was what began the process of like, what do I do next? So then I applied to all of these other jobs within Canada. It would come down to like me and one other person, me and two other people. And I wouldn't get the job, someone else would. And it was getting really frustrating of like, I have all this experience, I have all this passion, obviously, but clearly I'm not the right fit for these jobs. And I just out of frustration, I sent my demo reel to an agent in Los Angeles, not really expecting a response. I like physically mailed out a DVD with this at that point in time. And I got a phone call, a random phone call like a week later. And my agent was like, "Hey, saw this, your stuff. When are you in LA next?" And continuing the trend of like making yourself available, I said, "Well, I'm there pretty
It's
often.
Thursday,
Yeah, I'm there like in 2 weeks. All right, well, next time you're here, let's meet up." They ended up signing me, and now I was getting pitched for jobs in the US, not just Canada. In the meantime, I ended up getting hired by a entertainment show in Toronto called Inside Jam. It was on a station called Sun TV. But now that I had an agent in the US, I was getting pitched for all of these other jobs in the US. The big thing, as you know, not being from here, is getting the visa. So like you can get, they can be interested in you for a job, but they can't hire you without the legal ability for you to work. So that visa. So I finally had an audition where things went really well. It was for CBS in Cleveland. And they were like, as part of bringing you on, we'll also sponsor your visa. And I felt like I'd won the lottery. Like I had had all these other jobs where I was so close to getting hired, but without the ability to get to work, without a visa, you can't get hired. So for them to say, "Yeah, we'll sponsor your O1 visa," that changed everything for me. So that was 2010. And that job was crazy because my first week, they were like, "We want to make a big splash with you. The timing is right on this. We're going to send you to report from the Oscar red carpet on your first week that you're here." So I went from like brand new job, brand new city, brand new country, and now I'm reporting from the red carpet of the Oscars. It was like, what a way to kick things off.
You did an interview. I don't know if it was at the Oscars, but you did an interview in 2011 with Anne. Is she called Anne Hathaway?
The Anne Hathaway interview.
That went viral. Can you give us some context of like what day was it, what time on the day, and like a storyline of what happened?
It's so funny because that interview was almost 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And it still gets shared like every week. Every week, every few days, I get tagged in this video. And like, I was the one who put it up on my YouTube channel. So like, I'm totally cool with that. But she was doing a junket interview for a movie called One Day. So this is 2011. So I flew to New York to do this interview. We go in the room. I loved the movie. But just a few days before this interview, the first photos of her as Selena Kyle, as Catwoman from The Dark Knight Rises, had just come out. This was huge news. Obviously, the Dark Knight trilogy is massive now as we look back on it. But at the time, like, we were all anticipating that third Batman movie, especially directed by Christopher Nolan. So I'm like, I got to figure out a way to like ask her something about this Catwoman photo. And it was just a photo of her in the suit, and that was it. So I remember writing out my notes for this. And when you do a junket interview, you've got like 4 minutes. So it's like 3 or 4, maybe 5 questions if you're lucky. So I remember writing out all the other questions about One Day. And in that movie, she speaks with a British accent. I remember asking her, like, were you like speaking in the British accent all the time? And she told me this great answer about like, oh, I got to the point where I was dreaming in the British accent. I thought that was so interesting. So I had like maybe 30 seconds left before they gave me the wrap. And I'm like, oh, this is perfect. I've got the time to slide in a question about The Dark Knight Rises. And I remember on my notes, I had only written Catwoman suit. And I was like, oh, I'll turn that into a question somehow. I'll like, create a conversation around that. And the question I ended up asking her, I was framing it from the point of like fitness. I love fitness. It's been a huge part of my life since I was 15 years old. So I was framing this of like the transformation type of thing. I just did not word this as well as I could have or should have. And I said, we just saw the photos of you as Catwoman. How do you fit into that suit? And she told me this, like tricep curls and like, silly stuff like that. And I said, how much weight did you have to lose to get in the shape you're in now? And like, what I meant for that was like, you obviously slimmed down. You obviously got into great shape. I just didn't phrase the question well. But then it created this fun moment, right? Of her going, oh, what a forward young man you are. What's funny is I've asked similar-ish questions of plenty of other actors talking about the transformation to either gain or lose weight for a role. Christian Bale has had some incredible transformations. I've asked a similar question of like Chris Hemsworth or Chris Evans. It obviously just created a fun moment. And depending on who's watching the video, they either think she was flirting with me or they either think that she was super offended. I actually think it was neither. I think she was just having a fun moment. And even at the end of the clip, she goes, I'm sorry, I was just messing with you. Like she caught herself from dropping an F-bomb. But it's funny, then a few years later, she does Les Miserables and gets nominated for an Oscar, wins the Oscar. And like so much of her, like the talking points of the interviews leading up to Les Mis was talking about how much weight she lost to play that role. And I get it, like she was much thinner in that movie, but I just thought it was so funny that like the focus for that movie was all about like, look how much weight she lost to get into this role that she ended up winning an Oscar for. But I feel like I will be talking about the Anne Hathaway clip and seeing it on social media till I'm like 140.
What was your thoughts when you walked out of there at that time?
I walked out of there and I remember tweeting, and this is pretty early days of Twitter. I remember tweeting, I think I just offended Anne Hathaway in this interview. And my buddy, Kevin McCarthy, who's a fantastic interviewer, immediately called me. He wasn't doing that junket for whatever reason. And he's like, what happened? I just saw your tweet. And I walked him through the whole thing and he's like, oh, that sounds like just a fun moment. Are you going to put it up on YouTube? And I said, yeah, I think I will. It was a really fun moment. And I left the room like going like, ha, like fun moment. And I think the thing you need to realize in these junket interviews is they're doing like 40, 50, 60 interviews in a day. Like they sit in the same chair and a different host comes in every 4 or 5 minutes and like the cycle just repeats. So for you to have anything that's different, whether it's a scoop on the movie or it's a fun soundbite or you shared a laugh, for you to have anything different from just the main things they've been saying in every other interview is like an amazing thing. So I was just like, yeah, it's a fun moment. And I don't even think it went viral for like a while. Like I feel like it just was like building with a few hundred views a week. And then I think it must have got shared on some website and then it blew up and will continue to get views as time goes on.
You had another interview in 2016 with, was it Dakota Johnson and her friend?
And Leslie Mann.
Yeah. Can you give us the same context on that interview? What happened?
So that was for a movie called How to Be Single. And I remember I was just about to walk into the room, and whoever the reporter was that was leaving was kind of like, ooh, it's a tough room. Like, good luck. And I was like, oh, okay. And I sat down, and this movie's about like dating. So I sat down, and Dakota Johnson out of nowhere just goes, hey, are you single? Or maybe it was Leslie Mann, but they basically said, are you single? Because that's like the context of the movie is like, you know, how to be single and like figuring things out, like how like difficult the dating world is. And I just like, I leaned into it and started just playing with it. And I was like, if we can create a moment here that's outside of just like the typical question answer, let's see what this can become. And they just started having fun with it. I was single at the time, and like they were like talking off camera to like I think it was like a makeup artist or someone. They're like, "Oh, he's single too. Where do you live?" I said, "I live in Miami." "Oh, that's too far away." And they were just having fun with it as the cameras were rolling. And then it turned into like, "Can you take off your shirt?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'll like undo one button, but in my head I'm thinking, I don't want to sit here with no shirt on for the rest of this interview. Like that's weird. I also understand that like in 2016, it was a little bit different than now, like in the way that this would be perceived. But it was just fun. I was just thinking like, how can we play with this back and forth and just see where this goes? And I think I should point out that I was a very consenting, willing participant in this. I thought it was one of the most fun back and forths I've ever had in an interview. I think I even said during the interview, "It's the best interview I've ever done." And like I unbuttoned one, and Leslie Mann's like, "2 more, or we're not talking." I'm like, "All right, 2 more buttons, okay." And kind of like covering it up a little bit. But the other clip that doesn't get any attention is a few months later, I ended up sitting down with Dakota Johnson for another film. And as soon as I walked in, she goes, "Aren't you the guy who me and Leslie Mann sexually harassed in an interview?" And I said, "Oh, it was so fun. Not at all. No, what are you talking about? That was fun." She goes, "I just want to say that on her behalf, like, I'm sorry." I'm like, "No apology needed. It was just a super fun moment. And like, I'm glad we all had a good time." But that was, I still can't believe that actually happened. Like, it doesn't feel like a real thing of like, everybody else on that press tour just went in, asked questions, got answers. And I got this silly, fun moment that they were talking about on the late night talk shows. Like on the late night talk shows, Leslie Mann was like, I can't remember who it was. One of the late night hosts was like, "You know that like you asked him to take his shirt off, and, like the cameras are rolling." She's like, "I know. We were just like having fun." He was like a breath of fresh air, but it was certainly a fun moment that I'm sure will never happen again.
You had another interview with The Rock, who I know you're a big fan of. You had an interview where where he gave you the finger, and he actually did it 2 times, right?
Yeah.
As a joke.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the first time we interviewed and like what happened, like the full context?
So Rock's my guy. Rock was like at the very top of my list of like people I wanted to interview, like the absolute bucket list of celebrity interviews. He was my number one. You know, it dates back to me being a huge wrestling fan. So I've been fortunate now to interview The Rock like 10 times. Not that I'm counting or anything. But for this one in particular, he was walking the red carpet for the premiere of Ballers, his show on HBO. And red carpets are just tough to begin with. You're never guaranteed you're going to talk to anybody. And it's all about timing because they're walking the red carpet to do these interviews, but they've also got to like get into the theater to like make sure that the screening airs on time. So like red carpets are a bit of a cluster and you're just trying to do whatever you can to make it work. On top of that, I'm live on TV. So like I'm live on this segment airing on the Fox station in Miami. And we've carved out this like 2-minute window where I'm going to speak during the show. And we don't know if The Rock's going to be there, if he's walking down the red carpet like before he comes to us, or I've already talked to him. We don't know the context of any of that stuff. I've got 2 minutes to talk and I'm going to be on the red carpet. The Rock may or may not be there. It timed out perfectly that as they were throwing to me The Rock was walking up, and I'm like, I can't believe the timing of this. Like, absolute perfect timing that the second they're talking to me, like, we'll send it live now to Chris Van Vliet, who's on the red carpet. He's joined by Dwayne The Rock Johnson. He was standing right there. Like, the timing was absolutely perfect. So we started chatting. Actually, we started chatting during a commercial break. And I remember my producer in my ear is like, we've got 30 seconds till we come back. Whatever you do, just keep him talking so that when we come back on, you're live with The Rock. So I'm doing whatever I can to keep the conversation going. And then we finally do come back live. And that felt like the longest 30 seconds ever. And I remember my producer just yelling in my ear, like, you got to make this happen. Whatever you can. He needs to be talking to you when we're back live on TV. 20 seconds, 15 seconds, 10, 9, 8. And like, finally, I'm like, hey, Rock, we're live right now on Deco Drive. And he goes, we're live. And he grabs the mic. We're live. I can say anything I want. I'm like, well, you can't say anything you want. We are live on TV. But I'm trying to like extend the time. And I said, could we do a people's eyebrow to the camera? So we both turn to the camera, do a people's eyebrow. Little did I know that behind my head, as I'm doing this, he gives me the middle finger. And I didn't see this at all. So I turn around and I'm like, Rock, thank you. You are just the absolute best. Always so good to see you. Then I turn around and I like look at the camera and I'm like, there he is. One of the biggest stars on the planet, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, live on Deco Drive at the premiere of Ballers. I was on such a high. It was amazing. I couldn't believe this timed out. So like the live shot ends, we're packing up the camera gear and my phone rings and it's my producer. And I'm like, can you believe that? The Rock live on TV. And my producer goes, do you know what he just did? I said, yeah, we got him live on TV. No, he gave you the middle finger. I said, what? What do you mean? Yeah, he gave you the middle finger behind your head live on TV as a joke, but like, obviously you didn't see that. Yeah, we might be facing a fine from the FCC. We're going to have to edit that out. If this ever airs again, like, we've really got our work cut out for us here. I said, yeah, but we got The Rock live on TV, right? Yeah, but also all this other stuff. So like, it was so funny that like, I was still on this high that we talked to The Rock, but he'd given me the finger live on TV. I went back to the car. I uploaded that as quickly as I could to my YouTube channel. That clip ended up going viral like very quickly. And then I interviewed him maybe 6 months later for Moana. And it's funny, it's Moana, it's a Disney movie, right? Yeah. And I said, hey, last time I saw you, you gave me the middle finger on live TV. And he goes, oh, you know what that means, right? I said, what? He goes, big F you right now. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So he gives me the middle finger again during a press junket for a Disney movie. But the thing about The Rock is no matter who he's talking to, he's always going to create a fun moment. He's always going to create a fun, memorable moment. Like they always say, you shouldn't meet your heroes. If your hero is Dwayne The Rock Johnson, do whatever you can to meet your hero because he's everything you want him to be. He's kind, he's funny, he's very present, he's very in the moment, but he's also really willing to share that spotlight with you. Like he's willing to, like he realizes that he's one of the biggest stars on the planet. He's willing to share a little bit of that spotlight with you. Like at the start of that interview on the red carpet, he was like, hey, look at the nice pocket square you got. And I was like, wow, like Rock's giving me like a compliment on my fashion. Like he doesn't need to do that. How kind is he? But yeah, he's one of a kind. And I don't know how many people he's given the middle finger to during interviews, but I'm certainly one of them.
Didn't you introduce him that you were going to have a baby as well in another interview?
Yeah, he was one of the first people that even found out that we were having a baby. Like, I told The Rock before I told my parents, and there's like a backstory on that.
Yeah.
But we had just found out that my wife and I were going to have our first child.
When was this?
This was 2022. So this was the fall of 2022. He was doing an interview for Black Adam at the time. So this was October of 2022. And we had recently found out that we were going to have a baby. And I said to my wife, said to Rachel, here's an opportunity to like genuinely get like a real moment with The Rock, but also like kind of like reveal the news that like we're going to be parents. I said, is it okay with you if we if I have this moment with him before we tell my parents were coming to town like a week later. We wanted to tell my parents in person, obviously. They still live in Canada. So she goes, of course, you're never going to have this opportunity ever again. So I said to The Rock, you're a great father. And I just recently found out that I'm going to be a father. And that was one of the first times I had said those words, I'm going to be a father. And there's a lot of weight to those words. It's like, that's a life-changing thing of like, I'm going to be a father. And me saying that out loud really like got to me. And it choked me up a little bit. And I had never cried before doing an interview, especially not conducting an interview. I got really choked up. And he like got up immediately and gave me a hug. And he's like, hey man, I'm like, congratulations. I'm really proud of you. And he gave me some really good advice. Like it would have been so easy for him to give me just some like flippant off the cuff, like, hey man, get your sleep now. Like some silly advice like that. But instead he was talking about like how your why will change. And he's like, look, man, like I've known you for a long time and um, you're very driven in what you do. This is going to change your why and really change your focus of what you do. And then he also talked about like how important doing skin to skin in the hospital is. So like you take your baby and like without a shirt on, like you hold them right up against you. And there's like a real like scientific like um, reasoning behind that. But it was amazing for him to take the time to not only recognize that this moment meant a lot to me, but then to give me like real advice. And then I saw him earlier this year. The first thing he said to me was like, hey, Chris, how's the kid? And I said, I've actually got 2 now. And he's like, 2, look at you, man. Congrats. So that was a really cool moment. And then I cut that out of the main interview and I held on to that until after the news was like official and we put the word out that we were going to have a baby. But a really cool moment that I think speaks to who The Rock is.
What was your thoughts when you walked out of there?
I walked out of there going, first of all, I felt like there was this weight lifted off of me of like, I'm going to be a dad. And like, it's maybe not as scary as I've made this out to be. I also had many months. Our daughter wasn't born until May. So like 7 more months after that. But I also just left there going like, man, The Rock is one of the most giving interviews. And he actually said a quote during that interview that I love so much. He said, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. And he's like the personification of that. And even after that, he was walking around the halls of this hotel afterwards and like came up to me and we like chatted for a little bit and took a photo. And it was just cool to see how personable he is. Like to be at the level that he's at, but still find time to like make conversation with someone like me. It was pretty cool.
And at that time, you were hired by that network, right? As a reporter?
At that point in time, I was freelancing on my own at that point in time.
Okay.
I was doing my own thing at that point.
And when did the transfer, were you doing podcasts at that time? Or when did the transfer go over to you like fully?
2019 is when it changed for me. So in 2019, I was working for the TV station in Miami. And I had my YouTube channel. I had my podcast, which had just started that year. And the reason I started my podcast was honestly solely because my YouTube channel was doing pretty well and I was making some money from AdSense. But I was like, it doesn't really work if you're like in a scenario where you can't watch YouTube. So I was like, what if I just take the audio from my YouTube episodes and put them up on a podcast somewhere and like just call that a podcast, just like rip the audio, put it up somewhere. So it's like, you can listen to it when you're driving or listen to it when you're, I don't know, like mowing the lawn or going for a run or something like that. So that was like that. In 2019, I started my podcast. My YouTube channel was doing okay. The year before that, I had just hit 100,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel, which by the way, took me 7.5 years to hit 100,000 subscribers. Like I started my YouTube channel in 2011. So 7.5 years later, hit 100,000 subscribers. But in 2019, I felt like there was like a real inflection point, especially within pro wrestling. AEW had just been announced, and that was a huge thing. It's the first like real competition of WWE since I don't want to go too deep into the weeds here, but since WCW, which was their main competitor, had gone under and WWE had bought them out, this was WWE's first real competition. So like for there to be another like competitor out there was exciting. So I was able to get interviews with a lot of AEW stars and like really building up my YouTube channel based on these wrestling interviews. And there came a point where I was making more money or almost as much money in some months from AdSense than I was like being on TV 5 days a week. And I was like, if I'm doing this in my spare time, sometimes even taking vacation days, like taking vacation days to go make YouTube videos kind of made me realize there's something here. And if I was doing that in my spare time, what would happen if I could do this in like full time? So I ended up leaving my TV job to just bet on myself, give it a try with YouTube and podcasting and just see where it took me. And I figured worst case scenario, I can apply for another TV job. I can audition and maybe if I'm lucky, I can do that again. But if things work out, yeah, maybe I can do this for a living. Maybe I can make enough money to get by. So that was 2019 when I had the courage to do that.
Was it scary?
It was so scary. It's so scary because you're used to making the same amount of money every single week, right? Or every 2 weeks, you get a paycheck. You've got the safety net of a retirement fund, and you've got the safety net of having your like medical coverage. And you're basically going off on your own and trying to figure things out. And you know, being an entrepreneur, like you start every month at zero.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. And that was a really scary idea of like, all right, this month starts at zero and hopefully there's a little bit of AdSense that comes in. Maybe there's a sponsor, but you're just trying to figure things out. So really scary. But I think that the best things in life are on the other side of fear. And you've got to go through that fear in order to get them.
Did you have any mentor during this time, or were you all?
Really just doing it on my own. I've always been a big believer though in reaching out to people and just like, hey, could I just shoot some questions your way? Or could I ask you a few questions? Or could you hop on a phone call if you have any free time? I don't know if I have any like mentors who have been with me for the whole ride or people that I've paid to be like a mentor or a coach, but I've always looked at people who have been there and done it before me. And if I'm connected enough with them, even if it's through another person, I'll try to reach out and say, hey, could I just ask you how, like, what's your editing look like? Or how do you approach pitching guests or whatever the thing may be? And I love the quote, success leaves clues. And I'm a firm believer that if you can find somebody else who's been there and done it, and they can help you out along the way, you can learn from their mistakes. So hopefully you don't make them yourself.
What was one of your lowest points during that period? Do you remember that? When you stepped away from that, like the secure job type stuff to doing this full time?
So I stepped away in 2019. What happened in March of 2020? The world shut down. And that was terrifying because just 6 months prior to that, I had left, the guaranteed salary of my job that I had. And all of the interviews I was doing, they were all done in person. And actually at that point in time, I was recording them on my iPhone. A lot of times one of my friends was like holding the camera, like not good, but we all start somewhere, right? And then the world shuts down and we're all confined to our house. That was so scary because I was like, how am I going to do these? I've been relying on flying or driving to do these interviews in person. It was really scary. I remember I put a tweet out and I was like, I've never done a virtual interview before. Can you guys give me some guidance? What's the platform of choice? So a lot of people said Zoom, StreamYard was pretty new at that time. Riverside, I think, was brand new. So it was like, all right, I guess I'll give one of these a try. That was pretty scary. And I didn't have the equipment to do it other than just like my laptop and a webcam. That was scary of like, we were all dealing with the unknown in March of 2020 and not sure, like, remember we were told it would only be 2 weeks and then it ended up turning into however long it was. That was a pretty scary thing. But the silver lining in that was I knew exactly where you were in March of 2020. You were sitting on your couch in your house because you couldn't go anywhere else. So I ended up turning this thing that was pretty scary into like, well, now I can bank a bunch of interviews. Like if somebody's saying no to an interview, during like the peak of COVID, they're just like lying at that point in time. Like they're available, they just don't want to do it. So I just kind of worked on the idea of like, if I reach out to enough people, I'm going to get somebody who's willing to do it. So I ended up turning this super scary thing, like the unknown, into like, okay, we can keep this thing going and maybe even grow it a little bit from here.
Did someone teach you that, to look at it that way, or where did that come from?
I just feel like that's always been who I am. I've always been looking for like the best way to approach any situation. I'm a firm believer in like, I'd rather look at the best case scenario than the worst case scenario. And that's not to say that like, I don't look at the worst case scenario, but I would rather go, okay, if that's the worst thing that could happen, it's only fair to also look at what the best thing that can happen is too. So I've always kind of approached it from that way. And I've just always been really driven. I've always been so driven in that like, I'm just really trying to get to yes. That's so much of like podcasting, especially when you're booking guests. That's a lot of business, is you're just trying to get to yes. And if yes isn't going to come from this person, well, maybe it's going to come from this next person. And if it's not going to come from them, maybe it'll come from the next person after that. So if you can do everything you can to try to make yes a little bit easier, whether that's flying to be in the same city as that person, or it's working around someone's schedule, or whatever the case may be, I'll do whatever I can to try to make that thing happen. I've just been really driven in that way.
If you could go back to yourself when you were young and you were, let's say, starting to get an interest for journalism, and like when you were a kid doing that with a tape recorder and everything, and give yourself one piece of advice with all the knowledge you have now, what would you say to yourself?
I think the advice I would give to that little version of me would just be to keep going. And I think that I never had the opportunities when I was younger. Like I never had the mom or dad that gave you the part-time job, or the uncle that worked for a company that was like, oh yeah, we're hiring, you can come join us. I feel like I had to fight for every opportunity I was ever given. Fight to stand out when you're sending in resumes. Fight to stand out when you're sending in demo reels. Fight to stand out when you're trying to get an interview. And I feel like the advice would just be keep going, like keep pushing forward. And the advice that I always tell people when they ask about like starting a podcast or starting a YouTube channel is along the same lines. I always tell people, just start. Like you have to start. So many people have a great dream and a great idea about it, but then they're worrying, like waiting for the right moment. Like, well, the show needs to have a really good title, and then I got to have a good graphic for it. And I really want to start the show off with a big guest. It's like, no. Just start. Like just begin with where you're at. And then the second piece of advice off of that is keep going. Like just start and then keep going. Like 2 words for each of those pieces of advice, but I think they're both so powerful. And like to not let obstacles stand in the way, like just to find a way around them. Like a no today could end up being a yes in 6 months or 6 years or 16 years. You just got to figure out a way to figure that out.
Do you think you'd be where you are today if you got that help when you were young? Let's say you didn't have to work to get a job and they just gave you a handout basically, and you didn't have to book your own guests because you had a, let's say, famous father who already knew a bunch of people and just gave you. Do you think you'd be where you are now if you didn't have to learn through those struggles?
I don't think so at all. And I don't think I'd be doing anything I'm doing right now. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now if it wasn't for all of the things that came before it. And I'm fascinated by that idea. Like Back to the Future is my favorite movie of all time. It's, to me, the perfect film. But what I'm really drawn to about that movie is if this doesn't happen, then that can't happen. And if that doesn't happen, then that can't happen. Like, if you think about that movie, if Marty's dad isn't a peeping Tom and climbing the tree to try to peep into Lorraine's window and fall out of the tree, gets hit by Lorraine's dad, like all of those things, if they don't all come together, then Marty's parents don't meet. And if Marty's parents don't meet, then Marty can't be born. Like all of that stuff. And that's what I love about just life in general. Like if this doesn't happen, then that can't happen. If that can't happen, then this can't happen. So absolutely not. I think that me having to work for all of these things and like beg, borrow, and lie my way into interviews, beg, borrow, and lie my way into opportunities. If it's not for those things happening, I don't think I have the grit that I have to like continue to keep going, because literally none of that came easy. And I think that that's just part of what has made me who I am now.
If people want to get more information about you and listen to some of your podcasts and see what you're about, where would be the best place?
So if you're listening to this, wherever you're listening to podcasts, you can find my podcast, Insight with Chris Van Vliet. People are watching this on YouTube. They can go find my YouTube channel after this. If you like wrestling, there's lots of wrestling interviews. If you don't like wrestling, there's other interviews as well. But I think that no matter what someone does for a living, whatever their vocation is, there's lots of like little nuggets of knowledge in their story that you can apply to your own.
All right. I think that's a pretty good place to wrap this up.
Yeah, thank you so much. And my hat's off to you. I'm not wearing a hat right now, but kudos to you, like, for making these happen in person. Because, like, conversations are so much better when they're in person. So, like, so much of my story is also your type of story, too, of, like, wherever you're available. And if I happen to be in that part of the world, I'll come do an interview with you. And, like, I think that that's amazing that you're willing to do that as well.
Thank you. If you like this video and enjoy our podcast, make sure to subscribe to get notifications each time we post a new episode. It's right there. Thank you so much.